Our next guest recently played 3 hours of the highly anticipated Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, due to release on November 15th. Here to tell us all about it, please welcome editor for Gamespot, Alessandro Fillari. How are you, Alessandro?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. All right, so before we get into Fallen Order, right, we have to get your opinion on the Rise of Skywalker trailer that came out today. What
Oh,
are your thoughts?
I loved it. I mean, I'm actually a big fan of the new trilogy, and it's going to be exciting seeing how they sort of bring it to a close. Also bringing a close to all 6 or 9 actually Star Wars films. So it'll be exciting.
Yeah, right. There's 9 of them now. It's kind of insane.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that Star Wars wears its respect for From Software's Souls series and has had a change of pace. What do you really mean, right? We got a little bit of a teaser of this from the developers and little bits of combat, but what is it?
Sure. Well, the thing that's really interesting about Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is that it's very much a single-player, narrative-driven game. Recently, the last big Star Wars game was Battlefront 2, and that was very much a multiplayer-driven game set on recreating the big moments from Star Wars. This game is very much its own thing, and it's about the new character named Cal Kestis, who's a Jedi, up and coming Jedi who's coming into his own, and he's going to be rubbing shoulders with some other new characters, the Inquisitors. The one character is the Ninth Sister, who's wielding a lightsaber of her own as well. So it's very interesting, and what I mean by the Souls influence is that the combat itself is very much focused on sort of combat that's about reading your enemies and sort of seeing how they're going to attack and what sort of powers you can do against them.
So, before we get into the combat mechanics, in a previous GameSpot interview, the game director, he described how players can explore the game's different planets. So how is this all set up?
Right. So on Cal's ship, he has access to a galaxy map, and you'll be able to basically pick and choose which planet you want to go to. We had about 3 different planets we can go to. One was Zepho, which is a brand new planet for the Star Wars series. And we can go to Kashyyyk, which is, of course, the Wookiee homeworld, and also Darthomir, the planet which was something of a staple in the Clone Wars series, and I'm sure it's something a lot of fans will be excited to go to.
It's going to be good.
And you have very much you actually have freedom to actually sort of pick and choose which planet you want to go to. It gives you that freedom to sort of decide where you want to go next. And that's something that's really refreshing for a Star Wars game, which is, it's always been about just sort of going to these very exotic and just sort of vivid planets and, just sort of getting lost in them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a departure from kind of the guided narrative of the other games because they're based on the movies. They're based on things that have already happened. This one is entirely standalone. So, like you mentioned, right, there's a sophistication to enemies' attacks patterns and players' parrying strikes and force powers.
Yeah.
So talk to us more about the combat mechanics. What in it would you say was your favorite aspect of the whole combat?
Honestly, what I liked is that it just made me appreciate the sort of discipline that comes with being a Jedi. You have to be very careful with your lightsaber strikes. You have to use your force abilities very carefully as well. There's moments where you can sort of like mash the buttons and sort of strike the enemies as you want, but every enemy in this game can kill you like easily, and I say that for even like the lowly stormtrooper. True story. Like during my play session, a stormtrooper was able to get like the killing shot on me, and a big difference from the film, because they're usually a pretty lousy shot in the film, but this one actually was able to hit, like, just take me down. And as I was falling over, he was like, "Yeah, I got him." And and of course, going back to the Souls influence, the enemy that kills you basically takes all of your experience.
Oh.
And it's basically sort of like them just picking your wallet and just taking everything out of it. But if you're able to find that enemy, you're able to get it, and if you're able to kill them, you're able to get all your experience back.
Wow, they can actually aim.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you talked about finding these different enemies, especially when they take your abilities, but with that, is it like you can find these enemies on different planets? And when you're visiting these different planets, is there a level of difficulty with each decision in each planet you may visit within the game?
Yes, one planet in particular is Dathomir, which is, again, just a returning planet from the Clone Wars series. And on that planet are basically just a bunch of like rancors, like rancors being the giant monsters from the Return of the Jedi. And when you choose to go to that planet, and the thing is, like your supporting cast of characters, your the other members of your crew,
Hmm.
they actually warn you like beforehand, like they ask you like, hey, like this is a really dangerous place, are you sure you want to go here? And you have the freedom to go there if you want. And of course I decided to go there. And I immediately realized I made a mistake and I shouldn't be here. So I, after about 10 minutes of exploring, I just basically just left and went back to another planet. And that was more my speed, I guess. And this isn't like a role playing, like, sort of level of difficulty. I wasn't like out leveled or anything like that. It was more so for the fact that I didn't have certain abilities that would have made it easier for me to fight these larger enemies. And a lot of their attack patterns were very sophisticated. And it was very difficult for me to actually parry and sort of block and move around against them. So, but you're actually able to attempt it if you want. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing, which players will actually be able to sort of get through that planet just with like the sort of basic abilities.
Right, because yeah, I really enjoy this kind of aspect of the game, which adds a whole layer of difficulty to it. Because every Star Wars game, you're just like God, right? You're flinging people
Yeah.
around with the Force abilities. Like it's just you're overpowered, and it's kind of
Oh yeah.
awesome. But this feels like it's gonna be like, okay, I'm a Jedi. I'm learning my abilities. It's gonna be good. So how would you rate the video game overall?
From my first 3 hours I played with it, I was very impressed. Because I'm actually a big admirer of sort of the more classic sort of single player Star Wars games like the Jedi Knight series from the '90s. And this just sort of gave me those similar vibes, like same energy. Like it was very exciting to sort of like see that sort of growth, like very little growth at the time, but just sort of that growth from Cal Kestis as a sort of a Jedi Padawan to gradually getting a few steps closer to becoming a Jedi Master. And it'll be exciting to see where his story goes. And of course, like some familiar Star Wars characters will return. Like we actually got to see in the trailers from E3, particularly the appearance of Saul Guerrera, who is in Rogue One, and he's a major character in this game as well.
Wow. That is a pretty big, not spoiler, not a reveal because we already saw him in the trailer, but I'm excited for it and to see what other tie-ins there may be for the hardcore fanatics out there. Thank you so much for joining us out here today. Thanks for giving us the review and the load-in, and we can't wait for the release
Yes.
next month.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.